Bonsoir, bonsoir à toutes et à tous, bonsoir aux courageux qui sont encore prêts à travailler avant le dîner alors qu'il fait enfin beau dehors. Good evening, everyone. I think it's easier if our session is in English. I hope it's not a problem for anyone. It will be easier for me, and I guess it will be easier for our two distinguished panelists, Tita Larasati from Bandung, Indonesia, who just arrived yesterday night from Bandung, and Brian Kilkelly from the World Cities Network, who just arrived from London, also a long trip, but shorter. The idea we had while setting up this face-to-face meeting was really to introduce, or not to forget, within this session of the Planet Workshops, to tackle urban issues, but not through the lens of architecture or design or engineering of these kind of issues, but through a discussion, live discussion, a podium discussion, confronting two visions and two approaches of sustainability that are usually set apart, the one from the others. That is the social inclusion, social activism, citizen engagement, bottom-up, grassroots, civic organizations on the one hand, that promotes clearly sustainable agendas likewise, and on the other hand, the more well-known, I would say, technical, engineering, financial agenda promoting heavy investments that should be greener, right? And as you may have guessed while looking at the speakers, the promoter of the first kind of agenda, that is a social change agenda, should be here, Tita. And the promoter of the financial, corporate, green agenda should be Brian, right? As for myself, I would say I stand in between. I run a consulting company, and I'm also the president of a think tank in Paris, precisely dealing with these kind of issues at a metropolitan level. So here is the setting of our discussion. Since we are not too many in the room, but on the other hand, our session is also live broadcasted, and I invite any people who want to add comments to use the Twitter hashtags GlobalC2014 or hashtag FAF, face-to-face, to add or to include any comments about the session. They will be displayed. They will be displayed during our discussion. So, what I would like to start with is a very short introduction of our two panelists and speakers. And then afterwards, each of them will present a vision that is social change agenda on the one hand, green investment agenda on the other hand. And please challenge us and challenge them, because I want that this session delivers a powerful message at the end of this year's global conference. That is, no longer talk or think about sustainability, transformation whatsoever, separating the citizen engagement on the one hand with the smart, technological, green series of features on the other hand. And we will see that it is nothing easy, and it is nothing that common. But I think we have two people here who will show that through their engagement precisely and through their practice, there are some very significant clues that these kind of usually separated agenda could work much more closely the one with the other. And if it is about the time to make a choice, which is the theme of this year's conference, maybe part of that choice should be not to choose between social inclusion, citizen engagement, or the industry, but to find ways to blend these kind of issues. And probably the issue of cities, urban development, metropolitan development, should be a place for these two agendas and the people in between and the people behind to be connected the one with the others. So that's it for this very short introduction. A word about Bandung, a word about the World Cities Network. Clearly, Bandung is one of these rare places today which are not that well known yet on the global agenda, but which is a cradle, a place where social issues of the next generation are being invented together. One key illustration of that is that one of the founders of the Bandung Creative City Forum in 2008 finally has been elected, and he's only 42 years old, elected mayor of the city of Bandung, which is the third largest city of Indonesia, in June last year, right? So we have here a living example of transmission of civic engagement movement being transformed and channeled into political power. Another question is whether this will allow the mayor and the municipal administration to really change things and incorporate civic engagement into infrastructure development or not. But the challenge is ahead of them. But this example is a very convincing example of the power of civic engagement when it is mixed with politics and when it is mixed with an urban vision. Whereas on the other hand, Brian, and with the support of the World Infrastructure Network and Architecture Review, has managed to gather in London quite a number of very significant global players in the field of infrastructure investment, real estate development, and financing of green technologies. And I guess he can acknowledge that there is a gap between these players who need to find their financing on global capital markets and the way they envision citizenship, or the way they can envision social inclusion behind green investments and the marketing of green investments. And that is nothing easy. But on the other hand, now that Brian is involved by the UN at global level in talks preparing for COP21, we can also see that efficient networks of corporate organizations can contribute directly to shape our future. The question being how to organize, how to bridge the gap, and how to organize a significantly positive discussion between these two different approaches. So unless there is some key remark that anyone wants to add before we start, I suggest we go to our half an hour, 40 minutes discussion, because afterwards there will be dinner time, which is as important as our discussion. But we start with a very short movie, 4 minutes, I guess, which will be useful in contributing, highlighting the essence of our discussion about Bandung and the Bandung Creative City Forum. Afterwards, Tita will say a few words, and then Brian, and then we will be able to move forward in our face-to-face meeting. So please, if we can have the short Bandung movie. Thank you. Yeah. Round of applause. So, Tita, you are one driving force behind what you have seen here. Question is, why did you think it was worth traveling like 10,000 kilometers and 15 hours to deliver this message?
Yeah, this is one of the cases when people in communities gathers to show the government and the rest of the world what we can do actually from bottom up. Well, if I want, I would like to introduce a bit about BCCF. When it was formed in 2008, it was formed by about 45 to 50 communities and individuals because it's a kind of protest to the then government, municipal government, how we want to show them how to run a city our way. And this is a voluntary-based organization. Everybody's there. They have their own professional job, like architects, designers, musicians, and also hobby communities. And we have, since 2008, about 250 programs running. And since 2011, we did international cooperations as well.
So, when we say that social change builders, and clearly you are a social change activist, versus metropolitan plan and investments, do you think that all the force of citizenship engagement you have gathered over the years is allowing to really transform Bandung, or are you falling short of having any significant physical impact on the city?
The thing is, before, well, you mentioned about the former chairman of Bandung Creative City Forum is now the mayor already for 7 months. But before his mayor, we have a previous mayor was in office for 10 years. And during the 10 years, a lot of damages happened. So the changes in the city we saw by this community involvement gradually takes place. Because if we have to wait for the infrastructure and really the government to do something, it will take maybe 20 years if it really happens. So ideally, of course, we have a proper transportation system, for example, or drainage system. But the traffic jam and the flooding already happens yesterday or months ago. And we have to take quick actions to do that, and we cannot wait. That's why we have this organization to take care of things. And we'd rather have it bottom up because the majority of people, they don't feel they belong in a place if they are not included. And if they're not included, then they won't do anything about maintaining the whatever facility they have. So yeah, that's why.
And one other question before we move to Brian is, all the efforts are concentrated on the people, right? Of the neighborhoods, locally, the youth especially. But on the other hand, you're extensively trying to also promote the experience of Bandung globally, right? You were at the World Urban Forum in Medellin a couple of weeks ago. You could be traveling all the time, I guess, as you are invited to many places. How do you use the power of global conversations to implement social change locally?
Yeah, well, usually we just do things without naming it. So in developing world, where we're from Southeast Asia, we rarely heard, for examples. But then, for example, when we were invited to the first conference on design thinking, that was when I was told that what you're doing is actually design thinking, but we just don't call it that. So that's why we call it design action, like you saw in the video. Also in Medellin and so on. So what we have been doing, what you're doing is actually social innovation, but we just don't call it that. So we don't brand what we do, but we just do it. Maybe we need more methodology in there. But then, yeah, we got invited to places because they want to see kind of examples of what we're doing.
Brian, coming back to Europe, coming back to London, coming back to global capital flows, coming back to smart technologies, etc., green investments. First, how do you react to the movie we have seen? How do you react to the message that Tita convenes very peacefully, but which is a very strong message?
Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for the invitation, Nicolas and Tita. It's wonderful to meet you. It was a great video. I enjoyed it, and I agree with all of the messages in there. I think I don't think there's anything in there which I felt was wrong. I guess one of my observations from the video was that you're seeing the activism, and you're seeing the people moving and operating and enjoying infrastructure and parks and spaces and bicycles which have been developed by the city planning authorities and by the architects and the engineers and the technology companies. So of course, we need that kind of infrastructure, and I would challenge to say that actually there is certainly a need for activism and for engaging with the community, but also we need the leaders of the private sector and the public sector to stand up and take the tough decisions to build the kind of infrastructure, and especially green infrastructure, that we need today.
But on the other hand, and I want to challenge you here a little bit, is and gathering experience from French cities, the Grand Paris, or sometimes we tend in Europe especially to rely too much on the assumption that decision made by the public authorities or decision taken by the private sector do match citizens' needs, right? Yeah. What we see in the example of Bandung is that actually sometimes, and many times in fact, these kind of decisions don't match citizens' needs. Are you sure the leadership you're talking about is conceived, built, and that the corresponding investments are made to really match the citizens' needs, or that they just correspond to some trends that need to be supported?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because actually, when you look at city development and urban development over the ages, and maybe I'm contradicting myself here, but actually the role of planners is relatively small. Cities develop organically, so we're all involved in city building by the choice of the house that we buy or the apartment that we buy, the way we, furnish that apartment, the way we use it, the kind of lives we live in cities. Cities are driven more strongly by markets and by demand than they are by planning and urban development professionals. And that's true, but I think, the title of this conference is A Time to Make a Choice. I would challenge us all to think that actually we don't have a time to make a choice anymore. This is a time of crisis. If you look at climate change, you look at resource depletion, energy, water, available land space are all under incredible pressure. So actually what I would say is that we need to be getting together much more proactively, both from the corporate sector and from the people side, to really drive forward the changes that are needed in cities.
But how do you go to a global engineering company that is building bridges, roads, very complex and sophisticated infrastructures, and say, "Hi guys, stop doing that like that way, but change your agenda and include like people's needs, more grassroots approaches in your plans"? Do you think this is realistic to say that?
It's a challenge, absolutely. I mean, when I came to this event, I looked at the list of delegates and speakers, and I was like, my gosh, who are all these people? I don't recognize any of these names and any of these organizations. So I think in some ways there are worlds that are apart and that should come together. And it certainly is a challenge for the corporate sector and for governments to engage with the citizen level. Some of the challenges are, well, who do we engage with? There are all these special interest groups. Whose opinion do we listen to? And I guess the temptation is that they don't listen to any opinions, and they decide through research, through some focus group work, what's required. And also there's an element of city leaders feel that it's their job to know what's required. And it's the job of the global infrastructure companies to advise governments on what's required. And maybe there's a sign of weakness if you need to engage a lot with citizen discussions. And also need to remember that the citizen consultation process is often very painful for organizations, adds a lot of cost to the process of building a bridge or a road. And so that's a challenge for them, but also I think they are understanding that actually the volatility of the political environment is very costly and very problematic for the big firms. And so actually you can turn this around to being an advantage for them. If we can get citizens engaged and we can get citizens behind projects, then actually those citizens, that momentum can overcome the cycles of political uncertainty that are our main problems for getting infrastructure built.
But here we are, like, among people who are practicing, like, social development, urban development, these kind of things. From the people you meet, the global investors, global banking sector, global engineering firms, architects, design, etc. Is it the same kind of design as the design Tita has just mentioned? And do you feel from your personal experience, we are talking about personal experience also here, that when you go to meetings, when you interact people, when you involve them in your network, for example, that these people who are running companies are so sure about the future, right? Do you feel they are so sure about the future, or do you feel there is rising doubts about the best strategies?
I think there are rising doubts, for definite. I think there is a lot of uncertainty behind closed doors, if you like. So, you know, the face of the corporate world and the governments, of course, is very confident and very assured. But some examples of the uncertainty can be seen in how the whole kind of concept of smarter cities, which was launched by IBM as a sort of a marketing drive some 6 years ago, is now being scaled down, unfortunately. I say unfortunately because I think what IBM and Cisco and GE and many of the technology firms have been doing has been great, because I think certainly technology can bring a lot of advantages to how we build cities and how we operate infrastructure. But they're scaling down because they're finding it too difficult to make money out of trying to drive forward these innovations. So IBM have spent something like $165 million over the last 5 years on marketing this program. And they're not seeing the profits coming through. So they're scaling back. GE and Cisco have disbanded their cities teams pretty much. And this is bad news actually for us as urban developers and as urbanists and as people who love to see design and technology and innovation. Because if we lose the attention of the corporate sector to that extent, then that's not good for any of us.
Yeah. Tita, Cisco, GE, IBM, the global corporate world, but also in Indonesia, you've got quite a pretty large number of very aggressive developers, right, who won't hesitate to build 50 stories high, huge towers in the middle of neighborhoods. How do you use the design strategy, the active involvement strategy you have described, so as to sort of balance development trends?
Yeah, this is also to clarify what Brian said earlier about the using of public facilities. Like the forest walk, we had it built in the forest because that's not built by the government, but we built it ourselves within 9 days using the UN money because they were collaborating with us to hold this Tunza event, which is a conference for children and youth for environment. But then there's a big developer wanting to build in the forest 11-story apartment with 4 stories basement for the parking, and we wanted to protest that. But then the former chairman, who is now the mayor, he said protesting is no longer in the form of having these banners in front of the city hall, but we do it by design, by creativity, and we can do something. So he held this competition of what do you want your city forest to be. So submissions come from all over Indonesia, although they've never been to Bandung or they've never been in the forest itself. But then the winners are students from Jogja, and we really built this forest walk. And then we use it. We didn't ask for permission from the government or anything. We just built within 9 days, done. And also the bike sharing system, because we want to have our bike sharing system. But then the previous government, they didn't believe in having this sustainable kind of transportation. So we also use it with the UN money. So we told them, like, what if these children ride bike from their hotels to the venue? So it was approved by the UN, and of course they have to have bike then. So after the event is done, we end up with about 200 bikes. So that's how we begin the bike sharing system, city scale, run by community. So yeah, and then now that he's mayor, the developer gave back the right to build the forest to the city. So that's how we fight that kind of developer.
Another question is, you are working and teaching in Bandung, but you interact with French people, with UK people, with people from all over Asia, right? Do you find that the people you meet, like here in France, for example, you were in Paris a year ago for the global conference already. Do you find that, especially in Europe, we are responding adequately to the challenges? Do you find new ideas, really new resources here around the place?
Yeah.
Frankly speaking.
Yeah, frankly speaking, our challenges are different. Because also Brian was talking earlier about engaging communities to in a project or so. That's because you don't have so wide gap of education and economic condition and so on, but we do. So approaching people have different languages. That's why we always need middlemen to have this kind of, you see in the video, we engage with people in neighborhoods, kampungs and so on. And if you come with suit and tie, they would surely reject you. So you just have to get drunk with them or sleep with at the neighborhood and so on to gain the trust. So yeah, I heard it somewhere. Trust is the new innovation. So it is. If you want to make a social innovation, then that's in the beginning also in the video, we realized that Bandung's main capital is the people, the place, and the ideas. So it's not the material things, not the money, we don't have so much, not the technology, because we're always beaten by the Japanese and the Europeans, so people and ideas are important.
Brian, people and ideas. People and ideas versus technology in a global world, does it sound something manageable from a corporate perspective?
Translate it differently, I'm sure.
Well, actually, I think from a technology point of view, it's all about trust now and about people. So this is the first time in history that technology is now better than we're able to exploit it for. We're able to do more now with technology than we're able to think of or imagine. And that's the first time in history that, up until now, we've always been waiting for technology to catch up, to be fast enough, to be good enough, to be with us in our pockets. And now the question is, well, I have this technology now. What do I use it for? One of the big challenges, I believe, for us in this century is going to be who do I trust to look after and to analyze my data? And that's what's holding back a lot of innovation.
And who do you trust? Who would you trust?
I know, it's a challenge. It's a challenge. Actually, I would be more willing to trust an independent non-profit entity that was represented by the government, by the community, by the enterprises in a city, in a location. And I think that's what cities need to do. They need to create the kind of new structures that are truly collaborative and represent all of the stakeholders. And only then will we be able to hand over our data and combine our data and be able to use it to truly transform cities. And
so this is critical, I think, and maybe we can ask if there is any specific reaction about that. Do you mean that cities should hold some of the power and transfer it to the community to make sure that instead of trying to control and rule everything, the role should be much more about creating trust and about enabling communities, enabling private sector, enabling technologies and citizens to meet?
Yeah, this is happening already in Barcelona. Barcelona call it Barcelona 5.0.
5.0?
Yeah.
5.0, okay.
They really are. They're very advanced now. And they're very good at marketing as well as a city. But it's interesting, they've got a private sector organization who they've given a kind of a license to manage and analyze data for a particular part of the city. And the idea is to provide data to citizens in such a way that they can start to take control of their own urban environment. And I think it's a fascinating project to see how far you can go as a municipal government to give back control to citizens for certain services and certain activities. And I believe it's a recognition that governments have that they haven't got the resources or the capability in a rapidly changing world to really drive forward the city in an effective way. They've got to, sure, look after maybe and be the guardian of certain core services like water, energy, transportation services. But there are many things that the government actually many things that could be done better by citizens and by the private or third sector, as we call it, non-profit sector, than by government.
In this regard, we could say that the apparent gap or the apparent difference between cities in Western Europe, for example, or cities in emerging urban environments, like Tita has just been describing, is not that huge, right? Because finally, you and Tita are describing quite the same kind of features. Also, the starting point are the same. Would you say, in the room, if you want to have a microphone, if anyone wants to stand up, would you say that this gap is widening? Would you say that this gap is narrowing? Would you agree if we say that if it's time to make choices, if we need new ideas for a new word, in fact, we need to really stop thinking about the North versus the South, but try to really find a way to include ideas from the South in northern cities and vice versa, in order to bridge the gap between this social change approach and between this technology approach. Is there any opinion in the room about that? Is there a consensus in the room about that? Is there any remark? Otherwise, we will keep on moving on our discussion. No? Or a question may be addressed to Brian or to Tita. Yes, over there. And please briefly introduce yourself.
Hello, Jan Kienek. I'm a lawyer involved in corporate social responsibility issues, namely. I was just wondering if your two respective experiences, you refer to the new digital era we are living in, and with all these personal devices. Can you give us an example on your respective experience of the very good news that is behind it? You started already to describe the Barcelona, namely evolution, but a very concrete example of very good news and a very concrete example of bad news or danger throughout those digital devices. Thanks.
Good news, bad news.
Sure.
Brian or Tita, who starts?
Okay, so I think a great example of how technology is being used is an app was developed in Boston, which uses the smartphone's ability to be able to sense movement. And what the app producer did was they had everybody in Boston using this app as they drove along, and it mapped the bumps in the road as people were driving around the city. And with this app, you're able to identify where the holes are on the road that need repairing. And immediately the city authority could find out within a very small distance exactly where they needed to repair the road. And this saves the city of Boston hundreds of thousands of dollars every year in maintenance costs. So it's just a simple example of how technology can help revolutionize the way we maintain and manage our cities. And you know, there are countless opportunities of using this kind of technology. I mean, we're only just starting to kind of scratch the surface. An example of a kind of bad news, I suppose, is an example from my own situation in the UK, where my wife came home to me one night and said, Brian, my employer, which is the National Health Service in the UK, want us all to share our hospital records, our medical data. And we're all going to be opted into the system. So everybody in the UK will have their data shared across the medical bodies within the UK, unless you opt out. And she said to me, I want you to opt out. I was like, what? This sounds like a great idea. Because, you know, believe it or not, if you're in the UK and you have a problem and you go to a different part of the UK and the hospital needs to access your records, they're not allowed to. They're not allowed to get your hospital records from one hospital to another hospital. It takes, you know, days and weeks to get permissions. So that's the problem we're trying to solve. But my wife does not trust her employer. She says, you know, I have no confidence that the National Health Service in the UK can manage my personal data and not allow it to be used and abused. And I thought, isn't that sad? And it's completely, you know, she's not the only person. All of our colleagues are doing the same thing. They're urging all their partners to opt out of this scheme. So our real danger is that we have this wonderful ability, technology, data, to really transform the way we live. But actually, we don't have the kind of trust and the structures in place to really make use of it. And I think that's a real concern.
I think that's pretty interesting approach. Tita, the goods, the pros and the cons of examples of technologies.
Okay, technology, gimmicks, social media, and so on. I think the most apparent features of Indonesians are we are quite consumptive, that's one. Second, we're really catching up fast with the newest models and so on, especially for mobile phones. And we also like to chat, so we talk a lot, except me. But that makes us the 5th biggest user of Twitter, 2nd biggest user of Facebook, and we are catching up really with Path. If you've heard of Path, you usually only are limited to 150 connections, but then because Indonesians want more, now Path is adding it to 300 or 500, I forgot. But anyway, we are really using the social media, and the good part is that now the current mayor asked every department to use Twitter for updates, and also he uses his own Twitter for direct reporting, and he can take care of things really quickly during the time.
Question is, does this really work, or is it about marketing and political marketing, political communication about the city, or does it really work?
Well, during his 7 months in office, this works. So there's a fire or there's a flooding here and there, he's really quick in responding. And also, we've been working with a lot of urban neighborhoods, urban kampungs, and they have their own Facebook group because Facebook is really popular there. And if one kampung has an event, they can invite people. So they become independent in a way, online and offline. That's a good thing. And the bad thing is, like, all technology have two sides of the swords, the knife. So of course there are some rumors, and I told you we like to chat, and chatting comes to gossip. And if there's something negative or someone don't like someone, this is also a social dynamics, I think. But then you just have to have time to respond to it quickly.
Would you say that, I know you don't like, we love concepts like social innovation and etc. And you are more in the action. But would you say that it is like sort of Twitter democratic system you are building in a place like Bandung? Twitter democracy, Twitter municipal democracy?
You can say that. It's really, we're still technologically challenged in that because we don't always have Wi-Fi, for example. We don't always have electricity to plug in and to charge our mobiles. But yeah, it can be that.
Any other question or observation from the room at this stage? Yeah, please grab a microphone and quickly introduce yourself.
Nicolas Buffett-Fury, that's Focus Foundation in Geneva. I think the beautiful combination, if we can compare, is the citizens get together in Indonesia and something happens. The citizens don't get together in European cities, so nothing happens.
And why would you say that? Why wouldn't they?
Why?
Yeah.
Well, maybe the politicians and the mayors and everything have been in power for so long that I think the local people don't have the courage to stand up and say, we don't want that. We don't have the, you vote on this, but they're there for a long time. Look at many of the cities in Europe. You wonder who on earth could have done what they've done, and how could they've got away with it? And here we have a wonderful city where they've asked the community who built their own forest, did this, did that. How exciting. But is there any city in Europe you can think of and say that has happened
I think there is. I think there are places where this is happening. So Freiburg in Germany, for example, is one of the new first cities to go zero carbon.
Freiburg and Breslau.
In Germany.
Yeah.
But they're a very different city, aren't they? They're a big university city, very community bound, and have been for a long time.
Exactly. Yeah, I think it's very much community driven. So it shows you what can be done when the communities get together. I think it's beginning to happen. I think people are very disaffected and disillusioned with the political process, which is a real danger. What I think is especially worrying is that at a time when we actually need really strong political will and drive to make the kind of sacrifices and changes we need to get to zero carbon, to make better use of our resources, to deal with the fact that we've got billions of more people on the planet, we are at our lowest ebb in terms of political trust and capability. So it is a big concern.
Maybe like Bandung, it's the young also. Maybe we should wake up our young in Europe and give them the possibility to choose and to act and to take part.
Absolutely right.
So maybe we should ask some more people, young people from Bandung to come to Europe, and from more aging people of Europe coming to Indonesia. That would be a solution for migrations. I'm joking, of course, but the problem that Brian has just tackled, and I see a question here, is that why we need to implement policies supporting dramatic changes, right? And respond to climate change, respond to global demographic growth. On the other hand, the level of trust is diminishing, right? And I think this is really something that the whole session here today and tomorrow should be very much aware of, right? When we have just two people on the podium, right? Two people on the podium, this issue that we feel is on the table clearly arises as something critical, right? And when we find there is some trust and confidence, it appears that it's much easier to move forward. One question over there.
Hello? Yeah. Hi, I'm Leonore. I work for Vox.org. We are a political platform that compares programs for elections. So basically, it's very simple. 3 clicks, you choose your election, pick the candidates you like or hesitate between, and then it would be organized by themes like family, education, research, development, etc. And you will get to the exact proposition of each candidate ahead of the elections. So now I just wanted to rebound about 2 things. The first one about the lady who was sitting there just talked and said that the youth had to take the opportunity in Europe and anywhere in the world and try to change politics. I think that this is the typical type of organization that tries to do that. What we do is that we try to create communities of volunteers who suddenly get interested in what politics offer as a future. And another point that I wanted to make is about Indonesia. Actually, there are elections coming up now. In 3 months. And I was wondering if you knew of any, I would call smart city initiative, because I believe that it's part of a smarter city to have smarter citizens, and citizens that are more involved and that are more informed about the issues, but also about politics in general. So I was wondering if you knew about any kind of initiative that was tackled by youth or by communities around the elections.
All right. Thank you so much. I think we need to move forward quickly because dinner will be served in a couple of minutes. Sorry to get back to that, but it's also important. But I would say that for me, it's not smart city first and smarter citizens second. It is smarter citizens first and smarter city maybe second. But we want to answer your question about Indonesia and then in 2 minutes wrap up our session, so please stay with us. Tita, any significant example of smart cities, smart citizens, other illustration than Bandung in Indonesia?
Her question is about the election, the coming election. We will have presidential election in July 9th, and before that also legislative election. But yes, there is some use of the technology and social media, website and so on. There are voluntary works, also all voluntary based. So this group of people, more than one group actually, are putting out the data of its candidates and so on. So you can have access to that, and they're honest because they're not paid by anyone, and they're doing it with credibility as well. And there's a movement in there. So this answers that.
So interesting. One word before I give the word to the floor to Brian and to Tita for 1 minute each to sort of not conclude, but say what will be important for us to carry out after this short discussion. One word is, we entitled the session An Inconvenient Urban Truth, right? Clearly referring to Al Gore's Inconvenient Truth about climate change. What I wanted to say here and convene as a message is that we are just on the verge of very significant decades-long, 25 years maybe, trends of global demographic growth, which everybody knows. But I don't think we are aware enough of the risks that are really ahead of us, and that we cannot pretend we have the solutions for tomorrow. We need to build the solutions for tomorrow. We need to invent them constantly, day by day. But I would say it's very difficult to be credible and to pretend we have either from a social perspective or from a technological perspective the solutions for tomorrow. And that the risks, especially if there is a growing discrepancy between political power, citizens' trust, and financial and technology power, the risks are huge that this growth cannot be controlled as we think it may be controlled, right? I don't know if it is true or not, but it is part of the debate we need to have, and part of the discussion we need to help move forward when we say let's connect the social agendas with the metropolitan agendas. About agendas and schedules, you are all engaged into movements and organizations. Tita, tell us about the next steps of the Bandung Creative City Forum. Is it just like yearly events and festivals, or are you really trying to build something over the years? What is your target? 2015, 2017, 2020, 2050?
BCCF is every 5 years theme, so the current chairman will be until 2017, and we're building up each year. We're really holding on to this concept of urban acupuncture, which is making small changes, but in diverse area. And I think that's the most appropriate method now for Bandung or for cities with which are highly populated and very diverse to use this concept. So we are building up a concept roadmap for until 2017 to prepare citizens who will be contributive citizens and who will do, so whoever the mayor is or whatever policy we have, they would be independently or with their own awareness be contributive citizens by 2017. And we're doing that by having this event called Design Action, which is a workshop conference. So we really would like to solve urban problems by having these workshops with the 4 stakeholders of the city: academics, business sectors, communities, and government.
Government, yeah.
Government.
Don't forget governments. Absolutely, don't forget governments.
There.
So long-term, immediate commitment, long-term visions, and short-term plans.
Yes.
Would that be right?
Yeah.
Brian, challenging.
Definitely challenging. So as World Cities Network, we've created this a group of city leaders. We're working about 10 cities. So it's London, New York, San Francisco, Toronto, Barcelona, Helsinki. We've just opened up some conversations in Japan and in China as well with other cities.
In Paris?
And Paris. Very, very true. In fact, we are hoping to run our next major international forum in Paris in April with some good help with yourself, hopefully, Nicolas. And you know, the group really is looking at, you know, how do we work across sectors between government and the private sector and civil society to understand more completely the way in which cities can become more resilient. So we're looking at how do cities become more adaptable to the big changes that are coming along, more flexible to be able to deal with population growth, with resource depletion. And that requires us moving outside of our usual silos of planning, of technology, of development. And what I would love to hear from you all as an audience is how can we engage with citizens and understand citizens' needs more profoundly. And I think it is hard for governments, for city leaders, for the private sector to know where to turn to get that kind of insight. And so anybody who has ideas on how we do that better, I'd love to hear from. Because I think we certainly are quite weak in that area. You know, our events and our workshops and our roundtables and our forums, we have a great group of people, but we do sometimes lack the voice of the citizen in those forums. And I think that would be really, really powerful. So if you know a way of us helping to achieve that, and certainly I'll be talking to Tita about how we can do that as we hopefully engage with Indonesia, we'd like to hear from you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for staying up to now. Thank you, Tita, for convening your message of reasonable hope and engagement. Thank you, Brian, for being so frank and open to the technology failures, but also opportunities. And I guess maybe the urban future still is a little bit inconvenient to think about, but that clearly some reorganizations need to be made quickly, rethinking also about agendas, short-term, long-term, day by day, to make it a little bit more full of hope but also full of action and connections between places, people, technologies, social achievements. Thank you so much, and hope we can convene some of the messages at the end of the conference. Thank you. And of course, if you want to discuss with our panelists now or during dinner, you are more than welcome to.